From the Great Rocky Mountains with photographers from all over the world, you are listening to the Rocky Mountain Photography Show. I'm your host, Jeff Futter, and thank you for listening. This is episode 10 of the Rocky Mountain Photography Show. We have Caitlin O'Connell with us today. Caitlin, how are you doing today?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. I have looked through a lot of your photos, and I've been nothing but impressed by your expeditions all over the place, and it's just kind of phenomenal what you do. Do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started and how it is
Sh-
to be the photographer that you are?
Sure, sure. I've always been interested in photography. My dad got me interested in an early age. He was a great nature lover and photographer. And early on, I would get secondhand equipment online, and when I was traveling, and piece together whatever I could afford, and started let's see, taking pictures of insects first and macro photography. And then for the last 30 some years, elephants have been my photographic passion.
And where do you usually go to take your pictures of elephants?
Well, I have a field site in Namibia in Etosha National Park. I have been running a research study there for the last 34 years.
Nice. That is awesome. Yeah, and I kind of got started at a really young age too. My dad got me interested in it. So I think that's the best way to go is just get started as early as possible. Um, do you want to tell me a little bit about your research study with elephants?
Sure. Um, and that started really as an acoustic study. I was hired by the Namibian government to help keep elephants out of people's crops, and also looking at their ecology and behavior. And yeah, I was looking at how they communicate, long distance communication, and got interested in photographing individuals and their behaviors and really capturing things that happen so fast that your eye is often not really noticing. And I realized that photography helped inform my science quite a bit, because of those snapshots in time. And even with video, sometimes things you're assuming certain things as you're watching the video that if you took a photograph, you notice so much more about that moment and behaviors. So I've been studying their essentially their society, how an arid society is structured and how decisions are made, leadership, passing of leadership, and how families negotiate power between families. And yeah, it's a long-term social study.
I've read a little bit about elephants, and I think it's fascinating that they communicate at an ultra low frequency.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, no,
I think
they communicate the fundamental frequency of an elephant rumble is 20 hertz for a female and 10 hertz for a male. And those signals travel much further than a higher frequency signal. They're very monotonic, so they're flat. If you think about, throwing an arrow forward, an arrow has to be straight rather than curved. And so that straight monotonic vocalization travels much further and at that fundamental frequency. Um, so elephants can communicate over miles just by simply this low frequency rumble. It's produced at such a high sound pressure level that it travels a lot further than anything else. Like a trumpet would not travel as far as a rumble because a trumpet's um, emitted through their trunk and it's much higher frequency.
that's fascinating. I find that absolutely um, incredible. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the publications that you've been um, some of the places you've been published?
Um, Scientific publications or popular publication like
Scientific, photographic, any of your publications?
okay. Well, um, things that have really showcased my photography have been more popular science, like most recently a Scientific American article, May of 2025, and then an online magazine called Eon in December of 25. Those two essays really speak to the level of mm, the value of a long-term study of the same population, going back to the same individuals and understanding what's going on in their society and how different characters can shape the mood of a group, and um, being able to photograph moments in time, I think really help the audience see what's happening in those moments, the emotion of it. And I've really gotten into getting close up emotional shots of, a trunk to mouth greeting, for example, is how an elephant says hello. It's a handshake for an elephant. And there's all different kinds of situations where, say, a little male from a family group that's still inside the family sees an older bull at the water hole, and he's so excited to just place his trunk in his mouth, and you just capture that moment, just that tiny little trunk trying to reach up and touch the mouth of an older male. There's so many ways in which I want to convey the emotion of relationships of elephants to each other, and I think photography has really helped, and these outlets of um, science magazines have really helped me to do that.
And besides elephants, you've done some diving, for example, right?
Yes, a lot of diving. My main conservation interest has been elephants, but I'm also really passionate about awareness about this coral reef situation, and how reefs are disappearing, and warming of oceans, and um, telling stories underwater, I think is another way to build awareness of what's going on in our world. And so coral reefs have been one of those things that I've focused on. And underwater photography is a whole nother level of complication and expense. And uh, to be honest, I've found it much easier to we just got a Z9, Nikon Z9, and been using that in the field, and I love it. But underwater, you've got the flashes and all there's so much added level of complexity to get a really good shot. So I've enjoyed less technical photography underwater for storytelling, and then on land, much more sophisticated photography for those emotional moments. And I have to say, depth of field is a big issue for an elephant because they, as you can imagine, they're very long, and if you want to get that whole elephant or even the whole face, and we're challenged by late afternoon lighting into evening lighting. So your f-stop is already has to be low instead of high. And the high f-stop
So
gives
you
you
got to
that depth
bump
of
your
field.
ISO way up to be able to shoot at
Yes,
a little bit of a narrower
ex
aperture.
exactly. And these days, cameras are so much more sophisticated, so you can really bump up the ISO without losing too much resolution, which is it's been a lot of fun.
I've I'm not a swimmer, I'm not a diver, but I have just out of curiosity. This was back. I was using a Nikon D200 at the time, so probably 2008, 2009. I looked up a housing, an underwater housing for it, and I think if I remember right, it was right around like $5,000.
Yeah, yeah. That's about right. Yeah. I mean, those underwater housings are fantastic. They've actually developed ones that are more generic, kind of like a big rubber glove sort of thing, where you can have different kinds of cameras and not be stuck with one, the D200. I don't know how different it was over time with the you know, I still have an 800, 810, and 850, but
Mhm.
the housing probably fits a
It's
200 to
real
800.
similar. The it's real similar. At least holding it, it feels ergonomically really similar to a D800. So
Uh-huh.
they may be
And
compatible, but
the knobs and adjustments. Yeah, I don't remember what the D800 was like back in the day. I had the N90, that's when I was buying. Some of my cameras were bought in China while I was doing a ivory trade study in China, and that they have different letters than we do, N versus D, but it's a similar, really the same camera.
right.
Um, but but yeah, underwater housings have also evolved a great deal for the capability of accessing your dials and adjustments settings, and so that's been really great. But yeah, an
Yeah, and
investment.
I did notice most of your photos seem to be at sunset. And is that um is that because that's when the elephants are out, or is that because it's just gorgeous at that time of day?
Well, no, that's a good question. I mean, that elephants tend to come in around sometimes midday, which is so bright and bleak. But if we've got a blue sky that day, then it can be all right. But most of the time, they're coming in the very late afternoon to evening. So you're stuck in that window, like, oh, if you had just come 15 minutes earlier, they come right at the time where you're eking out that final moment that you can take a picture before it gets too dark. Or you've got to crank your ISO so much that, okay, I got the behavior in the shot, but it's pretty blurry. So
What
yeah, they come in the late afternoon most often, which is gorgeous because they're pink and purple, the colors that they have. That a gray elephant looks, these powdery pastel colors in the late afternoon to evening. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and the I do a lot of astrophotography and
Mm.
am just amazed at how well it performs at ISO 3200, even up to 6400. It just it blows me
Yes.
away compared to um, using a CCD sensor 15 years ago. It's just night and day.
Yeah, there was so much more noise back 15 years ago. I mean, now because we're in the Namibian desert, the night sky is just spectacular. And being able to do time lapse photography, being able to capture the elephants at night with the sky, the Milky Way snaking in the background with the time lapse. Oh my gosh, it's just spectacular. And modern photography, even the A7S III is another amazing camera for nighttime. The Sony A7S III we've used a lot for that sort of capturing. It's amazing.
What kind of temperatures do you have to put up with there?
Well, fortunately, our field season is in June and July because that's when the elephants concentrate at these water holes, which is winter for them. So that's our summer, obviously, in the US, but it's their winter. It's the cold, July is the coldest month. So at night, you could get down to freezing. I mean, that's rare these days with a warmer climate, but well, let's say 40s to 50s, 40s usually at night, but then in the day wouldn't get more than 80, 85 max, but it's also dry heat like in California.
Yeah, that's
So
not
it's not
bad at
bad.
all. That's
Yeah.
not bad at all. I was thinking because I live in Wyoming, and in central Wyoming, we've had some record heat this year, which has gotten up to about 105, 110, and it
Oof.
has just been absolutely miserable to get out and do anything. Um, I was thinking in the desert it would be really, really miserable, but that's pretty reasonable.
It is because it's winter, and it's also really maximum time to record because it's cold air. The sound just is so much better at night. In the cold night, the sound integrity remains in place, and it's just it's otherworldly beautiful making elephant recordings at night. So that's an added benefit.
Can you can you give any kind of tips or recommendations on how to get started with what you do?
Um, You know, I wrote a book called Wild Rituals, came out in 2021. And at the end of the book, I thought, what can I inspire people to do to just feel nature around them? And I looked at, if you have a backyard or a park that you can go to and just sit there and look at the trees, at the birds, insects, and just take simple pictures of them, and you start to notice things. You start to notice more, like, oh, I didn't realize that butterflies have these little pom-poms on the end of their antennae. You just you wouldn't notice that if you didn't try and either draw or take a photograph. So you don't need to be in the bush in Africa, or you don't need to be in Yellowstone. Yellowstone's a spectacular place, but you can go anywhere and notice things in your environment to really think about, well, how would I capture that? And why is that bird doing what it's doing right now? I look at an oriole in my backyard and it's shredding palm fronds because it's nest building season. And photography really helps ground you in your environment and makes you question things and notice things and really appreciate the passage of time in a healthy way.
It's easy to get lost in time when you're out photographing. I can um be on my way to an event or something like that and stop the car to I'm just tell myself I'm just going to take a few pictures. I'll be 10 minutes, and then an hour and a half later I'm realizing, "Oh crap, I'm really late."
Yes, yes. I mean that's the best way to get lost in time is behind a camera lens. And also, but putting the camera lens aside, because sometimes you can go crazy and not be noticing anything. You're just trying to capture, capture, capture.
hmm
But if you actually sat there and saw what was happening, you'd get a much better picture than if you just start clicking away. And I always try and tell my interns that when they come out to the field site, just really see what it is that you're looking at, and then take up the lens and take less pictures and you'll actually have more. Now, I say that, but I also would advocate for when you're in the action, like two elephants coming together to greet, then I would want to take a lot of pictures because every single moment your eye can't process all the things that are happening. And that's when you really want to take a lot of pictures. But not, in general, you should be looking and noticing first and then pick up the camera.
And being able to shoot now, I don't a lot of the micro four thirds cameras I know will shoot up to like 30, 60 frames per second in RAW. My camera only shoots 10 frames per second, which is fast enough for me for what I do. But
Yes,
but
yes. Elephants aren't hummingbirds, fortunately. So, to get, them come even running together, you don't need that many frames per second. But for a hummingbird, you'd want that.
yeah. Do you have any tips on macro photography? I struggle with macro photography, especially with getting getting it precisely focused because well, I first of all, I don't have an autofocus macro lens. I have older manual focus macro lens. Um, so I will try to focus on something and I'll get it in focus and then move the camera inadvertently 1 millimeter in either direction and it's out of focus.
Tripod. You gotta have a tripod. My friends that are really good at macro, it's all about lighting. Take it first, try and take stationary things like flowers rather than the bee that's moving around the flower, because that depth of field is just going to kill you. Um, so try with stationary things first to understand those rules, because you have to, if you're really trying to get, let's say, an insect, you have to have a fast reaction time. Uh-oh, it's moving towards me and I've got to change my depth of field or move. So stationary natural things like flowers is really nice because you can have a really tiny flower and then you don't have to worry so much. But if you have a bigger flower with a larger bloom and you want to get the whole thing in focus or practice, these a lot of people like to have a very shallow depth of field and have the one thing where you want the eye to be drawn, have that in focus and have everything else blurred. That's, those are things to play around with. And having a tripod, flash, and uh, stationary. Those three things to practice. What is the how forgiving is that depth of field, which it's not, but you know what the limits are as you're playing with it.
Do you recommend one of the ring flashes that go at the end of your lens, or do you recommend just a standard flash, hot shoe flash?
I I like ring because, well, I don't do that much flash photography these days because my subjects are so large and they're at a distance that a flash becomes irrelevant. And for macro, I would say that I haven't done enough recently to know what all the recent tricks are, but friends that do it use a ring and I guess to not have the shadows in any direction. And for filming, we're making a documentary about our elephant subjects, and we have to do some human interviews and having a flash, yeah, a ring. It seems to be a ring, and then those diffusers are really helpful just to help cut the harshness of the light.
What kind of gear do you use now?
And I just bought a Z9, a Nikon Z9 with a 180 to 600 millimeter lens, and I absolutely love it because I moved up from a Nikon D850, which is an amazing camera, with a 600 millimeter lens, and that thing is, I love it, but it's so heavy. It's really heavy, and it's a real investment to carry that thing around. But boy, I carry that thing everywhere. But now with the Z9, oh my gosh, it's it's just it's transformational. The quality, the speed, and just being that much lighter. I'm really amazed.
The only complaint I have with my camera, which is a Panasonic Lumix S1R, is the autofocus.
Mm,
For what I do 95% nature, landscape, sunsets, waterfalls, things like that. And for that, it's perfectly fine. But the rare time I am trying to shoot my kids' sports or um, wildlife up in Yellowstone or something like that, the autofocus just kind of tends to um,
goes in and
punt a
out.
little bit.
Mm,
It doesn't have a phase detect autofocus system that most newer mirrorless cameras have. It just has a contrast-based autofocus system that older cameras used,
uh-huh.
which I don't know why they stuck with that for so long. They finally fixed it in the S1R2, but um, yeah, I don't know why they did that.
Well, I know. Canon was always ahead of the game for autofocus, and Nikon's finally catching up. That was always my frustration with Nikon until very recently, but it's expensive to change your whole system, and that's kind of forces you to stick with one brand. And I've always loved Nikon, but they were never as good autofocus wise as Canon was. But now I don't. I would say they're equivalent, but I'm not an expert in Canon. But they're certainly light years better than it was, the autofocus in Nikon, and I'm very happy with it.
Well, Caitlin, did you have anything you wanted to add before we wrap things up?
Um, well, since this is a photography podcast, I would say that um, as a storyteller, photography adds so much more to an audience's experience. My first book, The Elephant Secret Sense, it has some photographs in it, but so many people wrote to me and said, "Don't you have more photographs that you can share so I feel the place, but I just want to see it." And that's kind of an interesting thought. A picture's worth 1,000 words. It just seems like that's a jaded saying expression, but it's so true. And it really is a way of sharing the world with other people to be able to capture those moments. And I encourage everyone to get out there and take more photos.
And where is the best place that listeners can find your work?
Well, all of the online sellers, Elephant Secret Sense was my first, and then Elephant Dawn about male elephant society. Wild Rituals is my most recent book. These are all nonfiction. I've written fiction as well, and I've turned to graphic novels because, again, pictures really convey so much more information. So I've become a lover of that genre mechanism of storytelling as well. So I've got some comics that have come out of my thrillers, ivory thrillers. So everything I write has some kind of scientific conservation messaging, and Ivory Ghosts is the first thriller that I wrote, which has, again, pictures that are just like photography. When you're doing storyboarding, you're thinking, what is the emotional moment in this scene? And so storyboarding is just like photography, um, but you're drawing it out from your mind because it's not real. So it's really helpful. So yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, uh, bookstores, yeah, and journal articles, science journal articles. I guess Scientific American or Eon, my most recent photo essays, those are a good place to start.
Well, it's been really good talking to you. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thanks, Jeff. It was great to talk to you as well.
This was the Rocky Mountain Photography Show. Please visit us online at rockymountainphotoshow.com. Thank you for listening and have a great day.